Okay, hello and welcome to the channel. This is going to be another rambling video. I hope you guys don't mind that sort of content. If I do get more time to make videos and I'm not just sat around thinking about making a video without wanting to do all the editing and all that, as long as I'm getting the information out there, I hope you guys don't mind how I do it. So this is, just rambling. It's not fully planned out. I guess things could go wrong halfway through, because I'm going to try and get a little bit more technical with things that I haven't done in a few months, or different stuff inside Blender, because it'd be really good to update some of this, some of my tutorials, just get more tutorials out there while Blender 2.8 is updating so much. So it'd be really good just to be able to make this nice and easy, and also think about putting some more advanced tutorials on my Gumroad, which you guys can follow at the end or of the video or in the description. So, hard surface modeling is quite popular for, it's just any object that is basically man-made in a lot of cases, and also includes sci-fi stuff. So my most recent example, which I've been using for a lot of my videos, is just this aircraft pushback vehicle, which I've got the textured scene in Unreal. This is a low poly game ready asset. Let's see how many polys it was. Vehicles can have a lot at the moment, but this is 60,000. So if I'm going to put LODs on that and stuff, then it should be not too bad for a hero prop, as in something that when you get really close to it, or even a drivable prop. Although cars these days in games just get as much of a budget as characters, it goes all the way in hundreds of thousands. So yeah, it's just a fairly lowish poly for what it is vehicle, and it has a lot of hard surface detail. Although it's not complex hard surface detail. I think anyone looking at something like this could probably, you could look at individual pieces and just think, it's not that advanced, because there's not much going on. You haven't got cylinders being jammed into cubes that need hard edges, and you haven't got just a lot of smooth circular cuts, because this is based on a real vehicle. And in real life, a lot of that stuff is also very complex to make. So when this is pretty much just like bent metal curved around into a shape, with things like light stuck on it, so you're not going to extrude a light from the actual mesh, say down here at the bottom. Though each of these, just like in real life, you could separate this down based on the materials. So you'd have a dark plastic rim around the light, and then a light cover. In my case, I think that is one mesh, because I didn't go into that much detail. But this is a separate mesh, because in real life it's actually a separate mesh that you can just pull off and then get onto the inside of it and mesh around with whatever's on the inside as far as the inner workings of it. And same goes for around here. It's all divided because it's literally made out of different panels, and that's the sort of detail that I think you're more likely to find in real life, and that's what I've got more experience with, although in the future I would like to branch out and do more sci-fi. I am looking at some reference, and I think some really good hard surface reference. I've got the art book lying around somewhere. Is from Wolfenstein. Anything from Wolfenstein, in terms of their sort of sci-fi hard surface stuff, it's going to be top notch. And this is Tor Frick. He, I believe, uses Modo, although he doesn't list his software. I think, oh, there you go, just in one of the tags he uses Modo. And I don't know what the advantages of using Modo are, because a lot of people that do use Modo come out with a lot of really good hard surface modeling stuff. I think one of the guys that works at Ubisoft, one of the senior artists there, is really pushing Modo, and likes to use that. And I think a lot of Modo users are interested in Blender, whereas say 3ds Max users tend to want to stick to 3ds Max. But this is also Modo, and again, it's a lot nicer than my work. It's a lot, there's a lot of, you know, really cool details. But I wouldn't say, I mean, the complexity, it comes from the combination of all these assets. The actual complexity of each individual asset isn't too much. If you look at just one little bit, the complexity of it doesn't go much further than, say, some of this stuff down here. It's just the combination of the stuff might be a lot nicer in some cases. The you know, some extra decal details on top do increase the complexity, and what we're currently looking at here is a game ready model. We're not looking at the hard, we're not looking at the high poly, we're looking at the game ready model, so you can see the sort of baking wobbliness around here. But I imagine the actual, if he does have that on here, I can't see at the top, I can't see, this is just all game ready. So you can see the slightly lower polys around the edges, but inside the high poly itself, I wouldn't be surprised if all of these bolts were modelled in. Which, if you're going to be using Substance Painter and stuff like that, is a little bit unnecessary. Although if you don't have that available as a decal to just to repeat, then maybe repeating it in the high poly is one way to go. Some of this stuff's quite complex, like how it's a beveled edge that's curved in more ways than one, and it comes down here. That actually, this little fuel nozzle isn't attached to the surface, so you don't have to worry about extruding out of that, although it is still placed on a position that's flat. Same with here on the front. I think that probably is connected, and there's some welding marks around there, which are probably just put in Painter, but that's a separate thing. It's not like they're extruding, and even, well, if it is connected, then it's on a flat surface, so you haven't got too many issues there. Let's have a look. Another one. So these are the high poly models. So this one's 3ds Max. A lot of detail. Like some of this is really complex. It's like more complex than your average component because it's got edges that have rounded bits coming out of it. So I'm gonna pick one of these components and just have a little look at it. That's really complex. How this part joins into that bit. How it's one component, and then past that point you've got some separate components around here. And then just in general having stuff connect together like that's really cool. But like that's not complex. That's just circles. That's just a cover. You know, duplicate that off a cylinder, no problem. Little edges like that. Not too bad. I mean, this whole thing, if you get rid of those panels there, which are created separately, then this comes around here, goes down, has a little bit of detail there, and it goes into a curved bit, which is very hard to create in some cases. And then from that point, he's extruded things into the curve, and it's like mirrored from the bottom, and it curves around the bottom as well. You've got things curving at multiple angles, which is something that I want to talk about. And then you've just got Insanity, pretty much. Again, I think it's very much, I mean, this is the game ready model by the looks of it. So this is the low poly. As you can see, a lot of this detail is just baked in. A lot of that welding is just painted in. That panel's separate, but a lot of it is like that panel's just decal. That bolt, sorry, is just a decal. That's a model bolt. Decal. So it's hard to say how much of this would have been a high poly if he doesn't have a reference for his high poly, if he's not showing it off. It's Wolfenstein. No, I don't think he's showing off his high poly, but he is showing off nothing. Okay, yeah, some of this stuff, all these bolts and these trim sheets are really cool. So in certain cases you can just grab, like, does he need a texture? Well, that's just a trim, a weld trim probably. A lot of it just is separate to the actual mesh itself and just repeated for the high resolution through things like this. Again, you can see all their information, so that's why I'm showing this off before getting through to it, because it's good to know what other people have covered before talking about whatever else. There you go. This is like, I mean, it's super complex, but at the same time it's made out of things that are no more complex than your standard 3D model. It's just a combination. The combination of and proximity and the level of detail of sitting down, and you really want the speed of what you're creating to be really quick, so that you just sit down and you can create this megaphone very quickly and then just throw it onto this massive larger model. I mean, yeah, it's crazy, but it's but if you do bring it down, it's not too bad. And that brings me to actually add-ons. Some of the stuff that is going to help you achieve and create things a lot quicker in terms of high poly, in terms of non-destructive ways and workflows. There's Master Xeons, or Team C, or Jerry Perkins. It's his box cutter, which he's constantly updating. I was talking to him years ago when he was just doing it for like fun, and he was really good at hard surface then. So considering that he's focused on it and kept working away at hard surface, and that's just basically all he does. It's I have no doubt that this tool that I don't actually own myself, it's only cheap, but this tool is definitely going to speed up hard surface modeling a lot, and he's constantly updating it. You can check it out. I'll put a link in the description. It is advanced booleans. It's basically just allowing more complex editing of a mesh, and how you can cut your way in and then it just speeds up. It's quite destructive in terms of the neatness of the mesh, and actually being able to bring this to a game ready model will take a while. But other than that, just to get the high poly mesh out of the way, you're going to create stuff a lot quicker with this. Which goes same for Decal Machine. This is the one that I don't know, that I know the least about, but it looks exactly like the workflow that is used on all of these sort of things when it comes, especially when it comes down to the low poly, because you want that'll just be a circle, or stuff that's detail when you're putting details on top with pre-made meshes, which you'll have a kit of meshes that you just want to stick around, and it just makes that operation really easily. As you can see, this is done on a sphere as well, so it's not quite as simple as just duplicating and moving the object to the mesh. It's also embedding it into the mesh and just making everything work together, and also clearly changing the materials. So that's very cool. And then this is just non-destructive editing. As you can see here, he's gonna select that. It's gonna correctly put the curve in, something that you can have difficulties with, adding more after the fact, adding more ring loops and taking them away makes it easier for low poly and makes it easier for a lot of things. These are a little bit more on the more expensive side in terms of well, it's double the price of box cutter, but you're definitely getting the quality and the frequent updates and just the amount of operations you can you're going to improve the speed of. And in this case, you're not just improving the speed of operations, but you're doing things that just at the moment don't work as well in Blender. It's just improving a lot of these features here. So I think that's a good thing as well. I wanted to look at what if you do Google hard surface modeling in Blender, then you'll get Master Z on here. You'll get CG Cookie. So I don't really know what you guys are missing in terms of hard surface modeling. I did put a poll up of what you guys want to learn inside Blender, and it was a lot of hard surface modeling. Some of it that's like a year old. I guess that does fall outside of the latest update, but you can still learn from a lot of this stuff. I think some of these tutorials are really cool. Things like Master Xeons, they will be made to push box cutter, but he'll also, you know, it's just a great way to learn in general, just by looking at what other people are doing. So that's cool. And then I've had this open just from earlier. This guy makes just really, it's not hard surface tutorials really, but it's just like really quick. As you can see, 1 minute, pretty much 1 minute tutorials for the past 2 months. He's been uploading these pretty frequently. They're just edited down to basically nothing, unlike my videos which aren't edited. So he just conveys a massive amount of information in 1 minute. It's just a good way to learn in general. Right, but we're finally in the 3D software. And I think there's just a few things that I want to mention in terms of making the modeling quicker, but not actually doing the modeling itself. So we're mostly going to be looking in object mode. We're going to be looking at how you can just you know, create things a lot quicker with base Blender without all these add-ons. So I mean, the first thing I'll mention is this is a real world asset. So this is something that I had a reference for, which is probably hiding somewhere, but it's something that I had a reference for, and all of the repetition is just what you'd get in real life. So the fact that this has got 2 of these canisters is just a reference in real life. The fact, you know, 2 of these in those exact mirrored positions, that's just how it is. Any of this asymmetrical stuff, like the fuel pump things here and there that just are not on the other side, that's just placed on top in a lot of cases. So the actual complexity of the asset, if we turn off the wires, then that puts in a lot of empty space. I did mess around with wires for a while, but you just throw like a tile wall texture on it and you can create them pretty quickly. As you can see, like, there's no, you know, there's details repeated around on here, and then in general that's just all mirrored. So in terms of creating that sort of stuff, I'm just putting a mirror modifier on and offsetting the UVs. I will change this to the high poly model instead of the low poly. So when I'm creating some of this stuff, I mean, I've collapsed it now, but if we get this high poly model, and I'm just going to separate it, I know that I've got a lot of these all over the place. So it's just not a complex model on its own. If I turn off the mirror modifier and I zoom right into this, then you can see there's not much to it. And does it need to be more complex than this? I could have gone further by adding like an extra inset here and and extruding downwards, and then just adding in those extra ring loops that are needed for that extra detail. For some reason, if you want to get really complex with things, then you're extruding more, you're just adding random details. But for my case, when you start doing all of this, let's have a look. Yeah, so there you go, you've got a more complex little thing now. But the real life reference didn't have any of that detail. So basically what I'm saying is, why would you want to, like, what's the benefit of having in some cases, if I've got a detail like just little things that you can add here and there that are going to make it more advanced, the real reference just doesn't have any of that detail. If you're creating sci-fi and you want it to be really busy, then fair enough. But I don't think there's any extra value in adding all that random detail to just having a basic handle that repeats. Because by the time you get around to the final mesh, if that's just how it was in real life, say again we're not talking about sci-fi, then you just get away with it, and it's just what it looks like. So nothing, whatever you look at here, none of it is super complex when you look at it individually, and obviously compared to some of the Wolfenstein stuff, it's not complex in general, but it's the combination of things that just make it seem more complex than it is. And now that I have messed this up and I've changed it into something completely different, one of the tools that would help me, I've got these everywhere now. I've already placed them. I'd have to separate them. I've updated some, so basically I've updated something, and now I want all of these to have the same, to be the same. I did try this earlier on one asset and it worked, so I'm going to try it again now. So I wouldn't go too crazy by adding two details like that, but if you do want to, at this point, you've got all these reference assets that are placed in these locations where you want them. Let me grab that on the X. And now I want to make those two the same. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Control L and link the object data. I'm going to just moved it around because the pivot point has changed. But interestingly, it's added all that extra detail to the object. So I'm going to do that. Let's get these pivot points in the same place before I do that. So if I hadn't have collapsed this and I haven't updated that stuff, if I make the pivot point, so let's get the pivot point, set origin to 3D cursor, and then we'll go with this one, and we'll put the 3D cursor here, and we will set origin to 3D cursor. Alright, now these two are both the same. The rotation's different, which is actually a good update that's coming in. I don't know if I've updated. Rotate the origin. I'm going to rotate the origin on this by 180. Okay. All of that would have been done beforehand. This is just a byproduct of me trying to make it up from what I already had. So I've just rotated the origin, and you'll notice the x-axis pointing that way and the x-axis on this one's pointing that way, so they're the same. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to press on these two assets. I'm going to hit object data and link them, and now that one has updated to be exactly the same as that one, which is what you want in a lot of cases. So if I've updated something, that tool of just being able to hit Control L to link the object data is going to make sure that you're not redoing a lot of work, because you get to a really late stage and notice that you do want the bolts to have this extra detail, which is pointless again, but There you go, and I could update all of these. If I duplicated this from that, then I could update all of these. And if I hadn't and I wanted to place more, so if I want to place one in the middle here, then I'll duplicate that normally, and I'll press, I'll turn this snapping on to be face and rotation to target from the active, which means that from the active element point, it's going to be taking the normal of the Z, and it's going to be projecting it onto the surface based on the face normal. So when I grab this duplicate object now and I press Control, that's going to snap to the floor. It's also going to snap around here, and you can see how that normal's changing based on a curved object. So when I bring it past this threshold, it's going to snap, and I can just place that there. Or if I want to be a little bit more accurate, I'd grab it on the X and just try and snap it, and grab it on the Z, and just or just grab it on the X at once by pressing Shift and Y, and then just so that way, grab Shift Y, and moving it along, and it's not falling out of. It's just perfectly in line. So that's two ways of getting detail into different locations. You don't have to press Control L and link it, but if I duplicate this, it says linked. You can just do that straight away. And now anything that I change on these is going to be reflected. So if I add an extra ring loop and I grab that, then it's reflected in all of them that are linked. Which is a good way of doing things. I don't commonly use the linked function in that exact way. I'll tend to use it to transfer some of the other information, which is also useful. So if I hit Control L and I can move the materials, collections, modifiers is an important one, transfer UV maps, all of that is very useful. When you are creating, again, something on a large scale with a lot of little components. Again, just created on a real asset. As you can see, that's repeated there. The actual complexity of those in terms of high poly is very little. It's one asset for me, but it didn't need to be because that's technically two separate bits. It's not very complex at all. Again, let's have a look at this. You've got a few things to think about in terms of how to constrain some of these loops here, but not complex. Not complex. I'd say this, you've got a lot of detail on this little thing here, but in general, you're looking at it. There's not. It's just once you constrain the right loops. I just want the complexity of it. Just it's achievable. It's very achievable with very little. As long as you've got some 3D knowledge, a lot of these shapes are just really basic. Again, I'm just stressing the difference between the shapes that are on this being from a real life and stuff like this, which is not based on real life. So that so you're going to want to spend more time if you're creating something like this on each individual asset, because you've got this stuff like the tires have got this repetitive inset going around it, and you're going to have to do some complex modeling to get that. There you go. Let's keep going, looking around, and well, I just can't find anything. I'm going to take it into rendered view. I can't find anything on here that is any more complex than what you'd usually do, but in another video I will go over some actual modeling techniques. This again is just breaking down the model. Some of it is more complex, but in general, I mean, this is connected, so I've mirrored that. Like, this is all connected, but in real life it's made out of multiple materials, so should it be connected? Not really, because if it's made out of plastic and it's stuck to a bit of metal, then it's got to be physically put there somehow. So you wouldn't extrude a bit of plastic from a bit of metal. In real life, you can't just pull metal out of plastic. So if it's a completely different material like that, then you're going to model it physically and make sure that that is different, which allows you to break things down like this. And in general, if I go back to the low poly, because it's going to be a lot easier to see without all the polys. In some cases, I'm using that linked duplicate, which now I'm going to do with Alt D. So immediately it's going to be linked. I move an asset just out of the way like this, and that gives me a clear view of what is going on with this asset. Especially when I'm low polying it as well, I can see around this entire thing. I mean, what you could do is just press your backward slash on the number pad and isolate the asset. But if you've got it side by side like this, then you can see how you're affecting it on the model, while also not being distracted by the rest of the asset. So I think that's a cool way to use the linked information. And separately to that, if I wanted to, I could isolate two assets. And the new updated Blender allows multiple object editing, so I can grab two bits and make sure that they just work together. Say like this bevel around here. If I want that exact bevel width to stay the same here and there, then using and all of these handles, they were originally created in panels, in assets that were separate. So if that middle one's separate and this one's separate, and I want to create all of these things to be the same and have the same sort of information, then the multiple object editing comes in handy, because I can grab all three of these and treat them like that one asset. Model it so that these two have the exact same height on whatever I want to do with that, and then go into it separately and say, right, but I still want this to have more information around the front here, which allows it to go, I don't know, inwards for some reason. So I'm just messing it up. But if I wanted to edit that, then I could look back at it and say, right, well, yes, I mean, they're all in line, and I haven't got any issues. What else? I think that's the majority of what I've changed. I mean, it's always good to have a lighting setup. I'm modeling like this, I can turn my scene off and I can see what I'm doing. This is how I'm modeling. But then if I want to actually take a look at what I'm doing, then I'll open my scene with these lights and the floor, which have no selection turned on them. So if I go to my object settings, I can turn selectable off, and then I can create in this sort of scene and even 3D model in a situation where I can see what's going on a little bit more stylized. But it's always good to swap between them. Possibly also, I did spend a little bit of time there modeling in curvature mode, so you can turn on the cavities and the just cavity mode. Yeah, I think that's a good way of doing it. shadow mode just gives you a little bit of ambient occlusion and highlights on the edges, and that just lets you see what you're doing a little bit better. I did like that, so let's turn that up. There it is on full. I wouldn't advise that, but it's possible. And yeah, I think if I was to pick out individual bits, say to model, or to focus on modelling, then you've got examples from this. I think I'll put this in the description. In my next video, I'll look at modelling some of these parts. If anyone is watching this and they've made it to this point in the video, and they want to pick out specific parts of this model which they think are too complex for them to make. So, you know, bolts easy. This whole component, I'd imagine, if you model a little bit, then you should be able to work your head around it. But if there are parts of this that are just too unfathomable to model, then that sort of information would be great to know. Again, I don't know where I'm going to post the modelling video, but if you guys are interested, I will try and do some actual hard surface modelling rather than just the theory behind it all and how it's not as daunting as you think. So that's been great. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.